everyone, this is PK Entertainment and we are back again, and here now we have another video for you, and we're going to take a look back and reflect on the spectacular action drama Backdraft. Released on May the 24th, 1991, it has quite the established cast of Kurt Russell, William Baldwin, Robert De Niro, Scott Glenn, Rebecca De Mornay, JT Walsh, Jennifer Jason Leigh and Donald Sutherland, and it was directed by Ron Howard. Now the story of Backdraft follows two firemen within the Chicago Fire Department, the established, well-respected Stephen McCafferty and his younger, more inexperienced brother Brian. We learn early on in the flashback opening how a young kid, Brian, witnesses his father's death when he sees him going into a burning building to rescue civilians. In the current timeline, Brian is constantly frustrated at trying to prove himself to Stephen that he's worthy enough to be a fireman. Stephen's ongoing disapproval, in many ways to protect Brian, causes much animosity between the two. We then see arson investigator Donald Rumgale, who is tracking a mysterious arsonist who is setting explosive fires all over the city. Donald believes the fires are connected to Chicago councillor Matt Sewick, of whom Stephen and the fire department bear a long grudge, as Sewick made several cuts to the fire department in favour of building community centres. This resulted in many firemen losing their lives because of lack of resources. Brian joins Donald in tracking down the arsonists, coming to realisation that his brother may be complicit in setting the fires. Now when we look back at Backdraft, it is for the most part a supremely great mainstream blockbuster. It's what I call an all-accessible populist entertainment, really ticking all of the boxes. You have great action, spectacle, drama, intrigue, romance, tragedy, suspense and tension, and it handles nearly all of these elements well enough throughout its runtime. It really has that glossy, shiny look about it, that all-American, gung-ho vibe, very similar to what we saw with Top Gun, and you could very much say that what Top Gun did for airplanes and the Air Force, that Backdraft very much does for firemen. We do of course have to talk about what elevates the movie the most, and that are the incredible fire sequences, and having watched the movie recently, they absolutely hold up still today and perhaps then some. The filmmakers went to such a great effort in making the fires so vivid and intense, like it's a real living animal, claiming all of these victims, and even Donald relates to this in one of the film's best scenes when he describes the fire as a living thing. It breathes, it eats, it hates, and it's that kind of philosophy that the film keeps all the way through. We get many searing sequences, a mixture of quick shots with much more slow motion. One of the most standout sequences when we see Stephen walking through the door rescuing a young child in an almost superhero type image, and the film clearly presents these firemen more like superheroes, and it may feel a bit overdone and a bit cheesy for a current audience, but I think it still works overall. Now whilst CGI was obviously used to create the fiery scenes, it's very hard to tell which is how CGI is best utilised, and I do think of how if this movie was made today, the use of green screen and CGI would be all too obvious, taking away the true power and impact from these terrific sequences. Now for all of the action and spectacle, there is also quite a lot of story within Backdraft. We get multiple dynamics of the sibling rivalry and disharmony between Stephen and Brian. We have criminal conspiracy and murder mystery with the tracking of the arsonist. We have hints of political and media influence as we see Sewick constantly manipulating news reports. And as mentioned before, we have the far more metaphysical outlook into the entity of the fire. And somehow the movie juggles all of these elements together, and they really add extra value, making Backdraft much more than just an empty-headed action film full of effects. Now in terms of all of the performances, nearly all of the cast are great. Kurt Russell brings his usual conviction and strength as Stephen, who still remains rootable despite his constant putting down of Brian. William Baldwin, very much the newcomer amongst this cast, and really if we think about it, he is the main lead character of the story. I think overall he does okay. It's not really an imposing performance, and there are times when he can come across a bit wimpy and a bit whiny, but overall it's an adequate performance to hold within the story. Now probably the best performance, as ever to be expected, is by Robert De Niro, who brings that typical toughness, no nonsense manner that's really embodied his career so much, and I think it's just great to see him in his prime like this. Again, a testament of how much he can stand out despite having a more supporting role. And talking of standouts, we have to mention Donald Sutherland's portrayal of Ronald Bartel, an imprisoned serial arsonist, who we could say is somewhat of an unnecessary character in terms of the story, but whenever he appears, it generates a whole edginess and tension. Despite only having 2 to 3 scenes, he ends up being one of the most impactful characters, and this is shown in one fantastic scene between him and Brian, where he exchanges his intel in terms of tracking the arsonist for Brian to reflect on his father's death. It's such a great moment and really sets the stage for the climactic act of the movie. We do have to once again mention the great Hans Zimmer, whose music creates so much of the atmosphere and tone throughout this film. We get those very patriotic, jingoistic tones and drums and horns, so very similar to his music later on that we would see for the likes of Crimson Tide and also The Rock. Great music once again from one of the all-time great composers within the movie industry. So if I had to give an overall score for Backdraft, I would give it an 8.1 out of 10. And when we look back on the movie's release, and it was a very solid financial success, grossing over $152.4 million from a $40 million budget, and I think a lot of this success was down to the spectacular sequences, where really a big action scale movie surrounding firemen hadn't really been seen regularly within cinemas, so it had this unique look about it, and I think the mixture of established actors, both new and experienced, would have appealed a lot to wider audiences. In many ways, it is an example of a multiple quadrant blockbuster that people of all ages can go into and enjoy. But despite its commercial success, Backdraft rarely gets mentioned when reflecting on big movies for the 1990s. It still remains an entertaining, exciting and to an extent epic piece of movie making, and definitely deserves more appreciation and favour many years after its overall release. So those are my overall thoughts and feelings and look back on Backdraft. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Where do you think it ranks amongst big movies within the early 1990s, or indeed within Kurt Russell's filmography and career? Let me know what you think in the comments below, and if you'd like to see me review any other movies like this, then also drop me suggestions. But if you'd also like to see me cover any other television series or any other issues within the entertainment industry, then also drop me a suggestion within the comments, and I will see if I can provide further commentary for you on those topics within the future. Please also hit and like the subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you very soon.